Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. How many teams can realistically win the national championship in college hoops? I believe we are actually down to about 7 teams. I think 7 is actually a little bit of a reach. I think it's really closer to about 4 to 5. And I want to go ahead and break them down. But before I do, a couple quick things. One, we are recording Tuesday afternoon. So some of the teams who are on this list, spoiler alert, Auburn, spoiler alert, Alabama, spoiler alert, a couple others, are playing on Tuesday night. One thing I will say, if Auburn takes a weird loss, if Alabama loses at Texas, it does not change my opinion of their teams, these teams, and their capability of winning it all, okay? So I don't really care. You might be watching this after Alabama plays Texas, whatever. It doesn't change my opinion, of course, barring some awful injury that we're not going to wish upon anybody. But the other thing I'll say really quick before we get into it is this. And I throw this stat out every year, and I think people are surprised. Because every time I try to have one of these conversations, oh, the national championship is down to this many schools, that many schools. You know what I always hear? I always hear, Torres, what are you talking about? The March Madness is a crapshoot. There's 30 teams that could win the national championship. First of all, that's just not true, okay? I think, and I always say this every year, but it's always a good refresher. I think there's a difference between a team that is good enough to get to a Final Four and a team that's good enough to win a national championship. Because you got to remember, and I always say this, if you get to the Final Four, that's only 66% of the way to the national championship, and you still got to win 2 more games once you get to that final spot this year, San Antonio. And so, listen, the facts remain is that while it's easy to say, oh, anybody can win it, no. Anyone can get to a Final Four pretty much. Florida Atlantic can get to a Final Four. San Diego State can get to a Final Four. But to win a national championship, there really aren't that many teams that can actually do it on a year-in, year-out basis. I keep saying it. I'll say it again. Since the 2007 season, okay? So we're in 2025 now. There have been 18 NCAA tournaments played during that stretch. So the last 18 tournaments, you take out 25 because we haven't had it yet. You take out 2020 because a little thing called COVID canceled the NCAA tournament. There have been 18 national championships crowned, okay? Of those 18 champions, 14 were number 1 seeds. So essentially, if you weren't a number 1 seed, the chances of you winning a national championship are very small. But then even if you look at the teams that didn't win, that weren't number 1 seeds that won a national championship, there's something, that makes you believe that they're good enough to do it. Again, only 4 teams since 2006 that have won a national championship that weren't a 1 seed. First of all, you had 2011 Connecticut, okay? University of Connecticut, UConn. And you're going to laugh when I give you these teams. But UConn in 07 or in 11 won the championship. But listen, they had the best player in college basketball, Kemba Walker. And the thing people forget, they were a top 10 team for virtually all of November, December, January. Go to the Maui Invitational, win with Kemba. They're in the top 5. They started 17-2 that year. So there was no surprise, even though they struggled late. 2014, UConn was another one. That is probably the only truly shocking one of the past 17, 18 years now. Because, listen, they were a 7 seed. They were okay, but not great. But even they had the best player in college basketball, Shabazz Napier. 2016, Villanova was a 2 seed, but they were the first number 2 seed. So they were basically the top 5 team in the country all year. And then 23 UConn 2 seasons ago, and you could say, oh, that was a little bit fluky. But remember, they got up to number 2 in the country in November. They dominated early. And oh, by the way, they won every NCAA tournament game by 10-plus points. So they were clearly the best team. They were one of the best teams all year. And so the point I'm trying to make, if you're not a number 1 seed, you have to have an argument that you're actually the best team, or you better have the best player in the tournament. And so the group isn't as big as people think. But now that I've done enough talking here and explained to you why the group is always smaller than you think, let's get to the 7 teams that I think can win a national championship. And like I said, I really think it's actually a little bit smaller, probably in the 4 to 5 range. First team that I think is good enough to win a national championship, truly shocking, I know, the Auburn Tigers. Okay, and listen, let me say this. Auburn lost on Saturday to Florida. We did no Saturday, Sunday show because of the Super Bowl. But stop with the over. Oh, my God, they lost. What does it mean for Auburn? It means nothing. I didn't know that teams had to go undefeated for them to be considered elite national championship contenders or even really good. Like, it was funny to me. I saw people in the college basketball media like, well, there's no great teams this year. Just look at what happened with Auburn. There's no great teams. Auburn is not great. Like, listen, they still got to win a lot of games to get there. But Auburn right now, just look at their resume, 21-2. They're trending towards having the best resume in the history of college basketball heading into the NCAA tournament. They beat probably the best team in the Big Ten in Purdue. They beat probably two of the three best teams in the Big 12, Houston and Iowa State out of conference. They beat a top 15 Memphis team. How about this? They have beaten 7 teams in SEC play that are NCAA tournament teams right now. Tennessee at home, at Ole Miss, Mississippi State at home, on and on down the list. Don't tell me they're not good, okay? Now, listen, they have to finish the job. They have to get to San Antonio. They have to win in San Antonio for them to be talked about like as a great, great, great team. But right now, they do just about everything. I think the thing that stands out to me with Auburn, we've talked about kind of those KenPom stats, the advanced analytics. We don't talk about them a ton. I don't think it makes for great radio. But what I will say, number one most efficient offense in college basketball, and really what stands out to me, I think to win in March, you got to have 2 or 3 guys that can do it for you if somebody's having an off night or in foul trouble, okay? Janai Broome is a first-team All-American, maybe National Player of the Year. But Tahad Pettiford has gone for 20 in a game. Chad Baker-Mazar has gone for 20 in a game. Miles Kelly was the only guy that played well against Florida last week. And so overall, they have 5 different guys who have gone for 20 points. Now, that's a little deceptive. One of them was Chaney Johnson in a game that Janai Broome did not play. But I think they have 4 different guys that can get you 20 on any given night. They obviously play great defense. They rebound the ball well, as Bruce Pearl said on this show. Stop with the Florida loss being something. There are 2 losses all year at Duke, Florida at home. Those are not bad losses. And by the way, Bruce Pearl said on this show, he was like, we're going to take losses. This league is too good. Stop. So Auburn, to me, obviously it goes without saying, I don't need to go on. They're incredible. Stop trying to pick apart their resume for something to talk about. They're awesome. They are obviously a national championship contender. Number 2 on my list is the new number 2 team in the polls. We are going to have a 1 versus 2 matchup in college hoops on Saturday in Coleman Coliseum. It is the Alabama Crimson Tide. That's right. Auburn is number 1. Alabama is number 2. Now, again, both of these teams play on Tuesday night, so many of you will see this after Tuesday, but it doesn't change my opinion whether Alabama is good enough to win the national championship or not. Alabama, to me, is kind of an interesting team from really 2 perspectives. One, it just feels like they've kind of completely flown under the radar, and I can't totally figure out why. I don't know if it's because, truthfully, that basically Auburn has been so good during the season that it's kind of overshadowed Alabama in its own state. I don't know if it's because, because of the fact that they were expected to be good preseason number 2 and they have largely lived up to it. But this team is awesome, okay? And if we're going to talk about Auburn's resume, and I did say Auburn, I meant Auburn, we have to acknowledge that Alabama's resume is basically just as good. Beat Houston in the early part of the portion of the season. Obviously, the Creighton win looks better and better as Creighton is alone in second place in the Big East, okay? You go on down the list, some of the teams that they've played and beaten, I think like Auburn, a lot of their biggest games are ahead. 2 games against Auburn, a game against Tennessee, game against Kentucky. So they still have some of their some of their bigger games ahead. But at the same time, they do have some of the best wins in college basketball. At Kentucky, the first time that they played, they will play a second time later in the year in Coleman Coliseum. The win against Texas A&M quietly keeps getting better and better and better because Texas A&M, it isn't crazy right now for them to get a 1 seed in this NCAA tournament. We'll need to do some work, but they're playing really good basketball right now. But Alabama's resume is incredible, and I think the things that stand out about them, both the positive and the negative with Alabama, 1, the wins are obviously great. 2, like Auburn, they can score on anybody. They're obviously leading college basketball in points per game. They've had actually 6 different guys put up at least 20 per game. A little bit deceptive again because of injuries and stuff like that. The other thing that stands out to me, I know that statistically Duke is the quote-unquote tallest team in college basketball. Alabama is huge along the front line in this sport. Aiden Sherrill off the bench, Grant Nelson, Jaron Stevenson basically plays the 3 at 6'11", and that's on top of Cliff Omoyori. So listen, Alabama, to me, I think they're every bit as good. I think they're they're somehow ranked number 2 in the country and sort of underrated. I just feel like we spend so much time talking Auburn, so much time talking Cooper Flagg and Duke, so much time talking about whatever, Indiana coaching search, Arkansas, Kentucky, Cooper Flag. We just don't talk about Alabama enough. I think we need to start talking about them more for the incredible season that they're having. They do play Texas on Tuesday night. That is before, they're hosting Auburn on Saturday. Let's keep it going with teams that I think are good enough to win the national championship. Number 3, I love those Cougars. That's right, Houston Cougars. Torres loves him some Cougars, okay? Houston, by the way, was actually my preseason national championship pick, and nothing has really changed for me. Listen, I know they struggled out of the gate, but I'm not surprised that happened, right? You lose kind of your heart and soul leader in Jamal Shed, and so when he's gone, it's going to take some time for things to adjust because he wasn't just their best player. He wasn't even just their emotional leader. He literally ran the offense. And so to me, it's hard for me to sit there and say it's not going to take some time because of the fact that was a guy that was so important to what you did as a team. Well, guess what? Since falling to, let's see here, let me do this in real time. Houston fell to 4-3 back on November 30th. So they started the year 4-3. By the way, 2 of the 3 losses were to Alabama and Auburn. So forgive me here. Since they fell to 4-3, they have gone 16-1 since. They are currently 12-1 in the Big 12, tied for first in the loss column with Arizona. Arizona plays Tuesday night. They play the same great defense, number 1 in field goal percentage defense. But I do think the offense is a little bit more well-rounded. They don't take a ton of threes. I think they're like bottom 20 in three-point attempts, but they sure do make a lot of them, close to 40%. Great rebounding team, as I said. Great team rebounding team, as I said. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 different guys are basically averaging 3 rebounds per game, led, of course, by Juwan Roberts. Now, listen, there's always going to be questions about Houston until they get over that hump, but they've been to a Final Four. They've been to multiple Elite Eights. Last year, remember, they were beating Duke in the Sweet 16 until Jamal Shed got hurt. This team is good enough to win a national championship. I have them at number 3 on this list. Number 4, maybe a little bit of a surprising pick. It's the Florida Gators, baby. And listen, by the way, let the record show Torres has been a Gator. Torres has been pro Gator. Florida Gators, the team, not the actual Gators that are living in lakes all over Florida and Louisiana. I'm not anti-Gators living in Florida and Louisiana, but I'm talking about the basketball team, okay? But I've been pro Florida basketball since the Kentucky game in the first game of the SEC slate, okay? And listen, call a spade a spade. Coming into that game, I had questions. How good was the out-of-conference? Blah, 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 blah. Well, I bring it up to say after that Kentucky game, I'm like, oh, that team is really good. So this is not a byproduct of, oh, they beat Auburn, we have to overreact to it. No, they've been really, really good all year. And obviously what was most impressive about that Auburn win was, of course, that they didn't have one of their best players in Elijah Martin. And so you look at this team, I think what stands out is a few things. One, what do they say wins in March? Guard play, boom, boom, boom. No doubt about it. They have great guards. Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Will Richard are all really good. I think I just mentioned it, but Elijah Martin didn't even play against Auburn in that win. They shoot the 3 ball really well, 35-ish%. And I think the thing that really stands out to me is that they really only have one true kind of low post player, but they're one of the best rebounding teams in all of college basketball. Alex Condon and Thomas Hawk, they don't look like guys that should be great rebounders. They're a little bit skinny. They shoot a lot of threes. They play on the perimeter. Well, guess what? Alex Condon's averaging 8.5 rebounds per game. Thomas Hawk, 6.5. And Florida is one of the best rebounding teams in general. And they are also one of the best offensive rebounding teams in general. I mean, I go back to that Arkansas game that they won at Arkansas. The offense was not playing well, and they just kept crashing the boards and getting second, third, fourth, fifth opportunities. That was how they won that game. And so to me, and again, it's a Bruce Pearl thing. Todd Golden's a Bruce Pearl guy, coached under Bruce Pearl, all that. Rebounding travels, and they are a great rebounding team, especially on the offensive glass. Florida's good enough to win a national championship. Now, listen, they're probably going to end up a 2 seed. They're probably going to have to get through, frankly, another SEC team, Alabama, Auburn, whatever. But they are going to be they're a force right now. They're a force right now. I like their guards. I like that they rebound. I like that they have guys that have been there before, gotten that taste in their mouth. Remember last year, their starting center, Micah Hanlogton, gets hurt in the SEC championship game against Auburn. He misses the NCAA tournament and they fall short. But most of those guys are back from last year's team on this year's team. Walter Clayton, Will Richard, and some of the guys that they brought in have NCAA tournament experience. Elijah Martin obviously made a Final Four at Florida State. Ruben Chinyelu was in the NCAA tournament last year at Washington State. So I do have Florida as a team that I believe is good enough to win a national championship. I have them at number 4. Number 5, and this is one, the haters are going to say, oh, Torres, why do you have them so low? It is the Duke Blue Devils. Listen, we can make fun of Duke, we can this, we can that. They're a really good basketball team. Okay, first of all, let me start with this. And I tweeted this the other day. So I have been sort of the last man on the island. I think Rothstein is here as well, of being hesitant to just hand Cooper Flagg the National Player of the Year. I keep going back to Janai Broome goes down with that ankle injury. I think a lot of people just assumed that he was going to be out for the year. And so, or an extended period of time, they just kind of handed it to, National Player of the Year to Cooper Flagg. And so I just bring it up because I was not a believer necessarily in Cooper Flagg being the National Player of the Year. And then what ended up happening, right? Over the course of the last couple of weeks, Cooper Flagg has continued to be awesome. Even in a quote unquote bad game, a bad effort against, a bad effort against Clemson where he did not play well, hit 2 monster shots late in that game to kind of put them in position to be in position late. They didn't end up winning the game, but it doesn't change the fact that they really had a shot there, even if it didn't go as planned. And so you look at Cooper Flagg, you look at the other thing that stands out is, 1, they have plenty of talent everywhere, but 2, for a team that is full of freshmen, what I actually find very interesting is the fact that for a team full of freshmen, they actually have they're very good defensively, top 5 in defense across college basketball. And usually with freshmen, you get a lot of guys that want to score, put the ball in the basket. You don't always have it on the other end of the court. But listen, top 5 in defense. Cooper Flagg's a star. Malawach is a monster down low. And the one thing I will say, I don't generally love teams full of freshmen to make deep tournament runs, but they have 4 or 5 guys that have been to a tournament before. Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster at Duke last year. Remember, Duke made an Elite 8 against NC State. On top of that, you have Mason Gillis from Purdue, who played in an NCAA tournament, played in the Final Four last year at Purdue. And so I just bring it up because that stuff, the concern about freshmen in the NCAA tournament, I don't necessarily truly believe it applies to Duke. Quickly, I have 2 other teams. I would put these guys in the class below the 5 that I listed above. I think it would take something a little bit extra special for these teams to win. First one is Iowa State. So Iowa State, started the year really, really, really good. As a team, they went to Maui. Their only loss prior to Big 12 play was Auburn in a game where they had like a 15, 18-point lead, something like that. You go on beyond that with Iowa State. They started 15-1 overall. And then they've dealt with injuries the last couple weeks. They did beat Kansas at home. They've lost 3 of their last 4, but you look at the 3 losses, it's like, we need to, I don't want to say give grace, but we need to be realistic about it. They beat Arizona, who's playing as well as anybody, or they lose to Arizona in a game where Caleb Love ends up hitting a half-court shot just to force overtime. And so it's hard for me to sit there and blame them because they were a tipped miss, whatever, a missed 3-pointer away from not having to go to overtime and winning at the McHale Center. They then lose to Kansas State. Kansas State is quietly playing as well as anybody in college basketball right now. Just beat Kansas. I think they're on a 5-game win streak or so. And then the last loss was at Kansas. So 3 teams, 2 of them are playing as well as anybody in college basketball, Arizona and also Kansas State. And then the loss at Kansas. Kansas is maybe the toughest place in college basketball to play. So there are things that I like about Iowa State. Some things that concern me, but I think more than anything, I just want to see them healthy. Milan Makanovic, I always trip up this kid's name, but we know who we're talking about. Mačevilić. Iowa State fans crush me in the mentions. I apologize, but I just always trip over his name. But Milan is back. Momcilovic, I believe is how you say it. Momcilovic. I'm going to work on that one before March, okay? It's still, I'm still working out the kinks just like everybody else. But he is an important player for what they do. Now, Curtis Jones stepped up without him, but I just bring it up to say, let's see them close to full strength. That is one guy that I want to see in that lineup. I have Iowa State at number 6. Number 7, and this one is truly a wild card. It is the St. John's Red Storm, baby. That's right. Big Rick energy, Rick Pitino, baby, all throughout New York City. So listen, with St. John's, it's an incredible run. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but they're doing special things. I mean, you can see on the bottom of the screen, it's been this long since they haven't won a Big East tournament since 92. They're in the top 10 for the first time in forever. And oh, by the way, just finished what was about essentially like the toughest 2-game stretch you can have in the Big East. Marquette at home, UConn on the road, beat both of them. And I'll just say this is like, we didn't do a post-game show after that St. John's UConn game, but it was just unbelievable the way that St. John's took over that game. And the defense is what is going to potentially put them in position to, play deep, deep, deep into the tournament. Okay. And so I just bring it up to solely say that from my perspective, I think St. John's is good enough to do it. The issue becomes I have some big picture concerns about some things as well. The defense is great. I trust Patino. They're a bad shooting team, though. One of the worst three-point shooting teams in college basketball, 29% from behind the three-point arc. They're under 70% from the free throw line. I mean, you go back to that Marquette game a few days ago, they missed 14 free throws in that game. And I think that's something that, in theory, could come back to bite them. And so I just bring it up because, in my opinion, that just feels like a tough thing. When you miss 3 out of every 10 foul shots regularly, I'm not talking about over a single game. I'm talking about you regularly miss a ton of free throws. That leaves a lot of points on the board. The other thing with St. John's that I think is worth monitoring is the seeding. Okay, so I think it's too early to dive too crazy into bracketology. But basically, because the Big East is a little bit down, right now only projected to have 4 teams, because some of St. John's biggest games are left on the schedule, UConn at the Garden, at Marquette, and because they didn't have a great out-of-conference resume, they lost to Georgia, they lost to Baylor. And by the way, I think they're a different team than that team, but I just bring it up because they don't have kind of the great wins that everybody else does, and they basically need to run the table, forget to get a number 1 seed. Probably just to get a number 2 seed. They can't take more than like another probably 2 or so losses. And so, listen, I think if they get advantageous seeding, if they get, say, the 2 seed in the East where the regional final will be in Newark, I think they'll be okay. But right now, even where they are as a top 10 team in the polls, they're a 4 seed in Lenardi's most recent bracket. So they still have a lot of work to do from a seeding perspective. Obviously, as a 4 seed, you're going to have to beat a 1 and then a 2 or 3. It's just a much tougher path. And so St. John's to me is a wild card. I don't know that I love it, but listen, I do think there's a scenario where we could see it. A couple teams that just missed the cut. I'll be super quick because we're going long on this segment. The Tennessee Volunteers, listen, I know that they're really, really, really good right now. And I know that basically they are trending towards potentially even a number 1 seed. Playing really well. They have Kentucky tonight, top 5 team in the polls. I just don't know that they have enough offense. They're great when a Chaz Lanier goes for 20-25. Every other game is a freaking rock fight if Lanier isn't going for 30, okay? And so for me, it's hard to envision them winning a national championship. Kentucky, the opposite. One, they just got to get healthy. Jackson Robinson not playing tonight. Lamont Butler was out. He was obviously back for the South Carolina game. But is the defense going to be good enough? You can't expect to win every single game putting up 194, 98 points and allowing 82, 85, 90, 94 on the other end. So I think Kentucky, probably the defense isn't good enough. One that I was really torn on, Arizona's playing really well. Let's give it another week to kind of marinate with Arizona. They play at Kansas State tonight, which will be a tough game. But those are my 7 teams that I think are good enough to win a national championship. Auburn, Alabama, Houston, Florida, Duke, Iowa State, and St. John's. And really, I think those top 5 let me put it this way. If I could get a 5-team parlay of Auburn, Alabama, Houston, Florida, or Duke versus the field, I would take those 5 over the other 63 teams that will make the tournament.